I'm Larry Fedoruk. This is I Was 8, my weekly podcast. A personal journal about a time growing up in a small prairie town. These are all true stories. This week's episode contains some language that's not always used in everyone's presence. I think that's my first disclaimer. Let's get on with Season 2 of I Was 8.
Chapter 6, Roger and Eddy.
Roger and Eddy were my dad's two youngest brothers, Uncle Roger, Uncle Eddy. I always thought of Roger and Eddy as a pair, a duo of sorts. I rarely heard them referenced individually. Most often they were talked of as a pair. Where's Roger and Eddy? What time will Roger and Eddy get here? Hey, you know, Roger and Eddy just got new jobs. They were somewhat of a pair. They were able to operate independently of each other, I'm sure, but most often I saw them together, like pals, like brothers. I assume it was a bond they forged early in their lives as the two youngest in a clan of 9. 4 boys, 5 girls, and 2 others, one lost as a child due to illness and another lost at birth. That's 11 for those not watching the tote board. Big family. By the way, Mom's side had only 7 kids. Also one lost at a young age due to illness. Many of them went on to have substantial families too. I tend to lose count. I think I have almost 50 first cousins. I don't know, is that above average? Seems like a lot. As I got to know my dad's family, I understood that Roger and Eddy, as the runts of the litter, probably formed their coalition for survival. Most of the family lived within an hour's drive of each other, and Sunday get-togethers on the Fedoruk farm were, as Dad would say, a real piss-up and bake sale. Yeah, I don't know what that means. It puzzled me as a child, and still, yeah, it was a piss-up. Often there were baked goods, but it was Grandma and Grandpa's house. They were free. I'd seen bake sales at the church, no piss up there. So how the combination of the two came in my dad's mind to describe some wild party was beyond me. Hey, while we're at it here, indulge me for a second. My dad also had this other saying to describe someone who was confused, vexed, at a crossroads. That guy didn't know whether to shit or steal third. See, again, I could not imagine a scenario in any sport, much less baseball, where those were your two options. Should I steal third because the manager appears to be giving me the shit sign? Oh, to hell with it. I'll just go to the piss up and bake sale. Dad's family on a Sunday? Let's just say raucous. Well, let's just say more than raucous. Whiskey, card games, yelling. As an 8-year-old at those events, the idea was to lay low and stay alive. I've talked before about the stark differences between Sunday gatherings on Dad's side as opposed to Mom's side on their homestead. Sunday with Mom's family was quiet, sometimes even solemn. The only danger there were those hard white peppermints Grandma gave you as a treat. You were a kid and they were candy, so you ate them, but they left third-degree burns on the roof of your mouth, and everything tasted like peppermint for a week afterward. What is this minty salad, Grandma? Coleslaw, you say. Yes, well, delicious. Pass me more of those peppermint potatoes. Mom's family got together after church. Dad's family got together after waking up hungover because they stayed too late at the dance at the Legion. Slowly, they got their act together and drove to the homestead for the piss up and bake sale. Last to arrive usually were Roger and Eddy. I guess because they were the youngest, so the night before they had partied the hardest. The booze began to flow, hair of the dog, and the loud card games began. Kaiser, by the way, that was the game. Do you know it? I think it's a Saskatchewan thing. It's like a hillbilly version of bridge. I won't get into the whole thing, but you use only 32 cards. 4 people play, you and your partner against the other couple. You bid based on how many tricks you can take. When I was 8, I must have somehow absorbed that game because when I got older, Dad and I were unbeatable at Kaiser. It got so that no one wanted to play us. We were like some Kaiser dynasty. I don't know how I learned the game because when I was 8 and at one of those Sunday events, I laid low. I mean, most of the adults thought of you as in the way. You're in the way. What do you want? Can't you see I'm trying to play cards? My cousins were all older, couldn't be trusted, so I found myself just trying to get somewhere where no one could find me. I'd wander the farm looking for a private space. Sometimes I'd just hide in our car. One Sunday, I heard a story from when Roger and Eddy were kids. Eddy was acting up at the dinner table and would not stop no matter how much he was scolded. Grandma finally got so angry, she grabbed her dinner fork and threw it with such force at Eddy that it actually stuck in his chest. True? Well, they all remembered the story and all laughed heartily like it really happened. Eddy would open up his shirt to show that you could still see the marks. Everyone thought it was so funny. For me, another reason to hide. You didn't want to piss off Grandma Helen. It was later in life I found out that Roger was actually younger than Eddy. Eddy seemed like the youngest to me. Maybe the fork story influenced that conclusion. Now, despite everything I've just said about my dad's family, I came to think of Roger and Eddy as the cool uncles. They drove matching cars. Cars they bought together, shortly after they both got jobs in the city at the meat plant. Roger had a black and white Mercury 2-door hardtop. Eddy, a blue and white Monarch 2-door hardtop. They both put Continental kits on the back, and each had a whip aerial. Yeah, whip aerial. Probably also a Saskatchewan thing. Each modified their cars with loud mufflers. Yes, loud muffler, that's an oxymoron. And each had fuzzy dice hanging off the rear view. They really did. Roger's black and white, Eddy blue and white. We had a 4-door sedan with a pine tree air freshener. Hey, Dad, can we get dice for our car? No, shut up. Okay, good answer. What time will Roger and Eddy get here? Usually you could hear the rumble of their cars from a mile away as you spotted the dust being kicked up off the road. When they turned into the driveway, you could already hear the music blasting out of their 2-car radios, always on the same station. If Roger pulled up first, Eddy got out of the car and gave him $1, and vice versa. 'Cause they raced each other on those country roads, and a bet's a bet. My dad wore dress shoes. They had cool boots. The uncles wore dress slacks. Roger and Eddy wore jeans and fantastic shirts that were loud and shiny. I had more of an affinity for Roger, because even though Roger and Eddy were the pair, Roger and my dad looked most like brothers. When I was a kid, I looked like a mini Roger, which, by the way, led to horrible teasing and innuendo. Nothing an 8-year-old should really hear, nor should my poor mother. I mean, the math didn't even work, but, that was Dad's family. Anything for a laugh. Upping the cool factor for Roger and Eddy was when they began to date Maxine and May, respectively, if not respectably. And they did this, of course, right around the same time. Maxine was a blonde, freckle-faced pixie, while May had dark hair and seemed more brooding. Maxine and May started to be regulars at the family dinners. They were nothing like the aunties I had. They were probably just out of high school and dating these two rogues, Roger and Eddy, with the fancy cars and shiny shirts. Guess what? They thought little Larry was about the cutest thing going. Maxine and May were not adults I was trying to avoid. On the contrary, they wanted to know what I was up to. How was school? What grade was I in? Did I like school? What's your favorite subject? Do you like baseball? Do you read comic books? Big hugs from Maxine and May, after which I smelled like them for the rest of the day. That was something. Yeah, something. What was that something? I mean, I was only 8, but they stirred up these feelings. You know, people say that heterosexuals don't have to come out. It's gay people that may choose to come out at some point. Well, not if you're Catholic. If you're straight and Catholic, at some point you have to declare, you know what, folks? I think I'm interested in the opposite sex. At which point they tell you that it's too soon and everything else that's wrong with that. And then you decide to go it alone, so to speak. So with Maxine and May, I was too young to identify any of that. But now that I look back on it, I pretty much decided at the time to remain a closeted heterosexual and keep my crushes to myself. At least now going to my dad's family gatherings weren't all about fear and apprehension. They had purpose. Maxine and May. Thank you, Roger and Eddy. I have other uncles, mostly Mom's brothers, who took me places, told me stories, remembered my birthday, bought me presents, so on and so forth. Roger and Eddy did none of that. Come to think of it, I had almost zero relationship with them. Yet somehow, they were the cool uncles that as an 8-year-old I looked up to and wanted to be like. I think the distance factor helped that. I didn't really know them. I only knew the image, the aura. Cool. Yes, Roger and Eddy, the cool uncles. The blooms stayed on that rose for a few years. But then time showed up, that SOB. You should know that Roger married Maxine, Eddy married May. Each couple had kids. I got older and became interested in girls at school, although Maxine and May were still the gold standard. But they were more like my aunts now. Once on a trip to the city, Dad and I visited Roger and Eddy on the job at the meat plant. There they were. No cool shoes or shiny shirts, just blooded coveralls and rubber boots as they shoveled scraps into the wiener machine. I watched intently. Oddly, I still eat hot dogs. And I have that flashback almost every time I do. Hey, Dad, do they still have the Mercury and the Monarch? Well, yes, but it's actually the bank that owns those cars. Again, Dad, good answer. Thanks for the reality check. It seems the amount of reality you have to face on a daily basis increases proportionately with your age. And of course, that sucks. A postscript to this podcast. I mentioned on my bonus episode, The Making of I Was 8, that I like to work weeks ahead on this show. As I began work on this episode, from a script written over a year ago, I heard the news that my Uncle Roger had just passed on his 82nd birthday. The youngest and the last living of that clan now gone. My dad died when he was 57, and when I looked at Roger's picture, I thought, this is what my dad would have looked like at 82. I called his widow, my Auntie Maxine in Saskatchewan, and when she got on the phone, her voice sounded almost exactly like it did when I was 8. We talked for over an hour. This episode is dedicated in loving memory to my Uncle Roger.